Hello, and welcome back to Sleepy Hollow Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered from the mists of Sleepy Hollow, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. To whoever finds this. My name is Sven. I know some English, but mostly Swedish, so I'll write as clearly as I can. I can't explain what I'm about to tell you in a short way. If I tried, it would sound crazy, or simple, or like I'm leaving things out. So please read all of it before you decide what you think. If you travel far north, into Norland, that's where you might find us. I can't give you a neat address. I only know what my mother told me, that we are in Norrland, Sweden, somewhere up a hillside. If you follow the slope and keep going, you'll have to walk slowly and pay attention, or you'll miss it. Our village sits squeezed between forest and snow, almost invisible. To most people, it would look like nothing is there, just trees, white ground, and wind. We are small and quiet. We keep to ourselves. We don't go looking for trouble, so trouble usually doesn't come looking for us. And we are good people, a real family, a real community, my father used to say. The way we live is normal for a place like this. Work, winter, chores, school, food, birthdays, church holidays, the same faces every day, the same jokes, the same worries. Everything is ordinary. Except for one thing. Every few years, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, a little white lamb comes into the village and takes one of us away. The lamb always comes back again in the future, the same as ever. But the person it takes never returns. Maybe this doesn't happen where you live. Maybe it sounds like a myth, or a prank, or a sickness that makes people believe the same story. I don't know. I only know it happens here. It has happened for as long as anyone can remember. And because it has always happened, the adults treat it like weather, like something you can hate and fear and curse, but not stop. If this is not normal for you, then maybe your world is the strange one. If it is normal, then you already understand why I am writing this the way I am. In my house, there is my mother, my little sister Amelia, and me. We call my sister Amy because there is another Amelia in the village who is 2 years older, and she got the name first. I am Sven. I was named after my father. My father is dead. It wasn't the lamb that took him. The flu did, long ago, during one of the worst winters we ever had. The nearest hospital was too far, and my father was stubborn in the way men can be when they think asking for help makes them weak. He stayed in bed and got worse. And then one night he died in a quiet that still makes my skin feel tight when I remember it. No final speech, no warning, no big dramatic moment. He was there, and then he wasn't. At his burial, his childhood best friend, Bjork, spoke. Bjork is a large man, thick through the shoulders, the kind of man you believe could lift a fallen tree with his bare hands. He cried openly, without shame. Mr. Olafsson spoke too. He was what you might call our village leader, though we don't call it that. He was just the man people listened to, the man who settled arguments, the man who decided how things should be done when everyone disagreed. The adults who loved my father touched my sister and me a lot that day. They held our cold hands in their warm gloves. They knelt down so their faces were close to ours. They told us soft things, the same soft things people always say when someone dies. One woman did it more than the others, Mrs. Holmberg. She kept squeezing our hands and telling us not to cry. It bothered me. It didn't make sense. If you're telling children not to cry at a funeral, it's like you're asking them not to breathe. Mrs. Holmberg didn't take her own advice years later when the lamb took her son. My sister and I were never big on showing emotions. Amy was more expressive than me, but even she held things in. It was strange because, even though I was the one named after our father, she looked the most like him. They both had dirty blonde hair that faded in the cold, turning pale and beige. They both had heavy dark eyebrows that sat low, giving them a constant, serious look, like they were thinking about something difficult. Our mother liked to joke that it was as if my father carried Amy for 9 months, not her. She used to say they were two of the same person. The sad part was that it wasn't just their faces that matched. Their health did too. Amy was always cold. She wore layers even indoors. Her nose was often red and hot, while the rest of her looked pale. She moved like she was walking through deep water, like each step cost her more energy than it should. Snow is hard for everyone, but Amy walked as if the ground was pulling her down. Because of that, my mother asked me to promise I would always stay close to Amy. She didn't say it like a normal request. She said it like an order that came out of love and fear at the same time. I promised. I meant it too. I was her big brother. It was my job. My mother, if I'm honest, was like most adults, boring. She could talk for hours about weather or knitting or which stew tasted best after a long day. But if I tried to talk about things that mattered to me, sword-shaped sticks, animal tracks, a frozen frog I found under the ice, she'd act like I was putting dirt on her clean floor. My father and Amy at least tried to pretend my interests were worth listening to. Still, my mother had one thing about her that I didn't understand when I was younger. She would cry at strange times. Not at the big moments, not always, but at small ones. If the stew burned a little, if she woke up too early and my father's side of the bed was still rumpled from her turning in her sleep, if snow piled up in front of his shed, the shed he built with his own hands. Now I understand it wasn't the stew, it wasn't the bed, it wasn't the shed. It was him. Those were just places where the absence of him showed up in a way she couldn't ignore. After he died, she buried herself in routine. It was like she thought if she stayed busy enough, she could forget what it felt like to live in this village without him. And when I was younger, I had a thought that makes me feel sick now. I thought maybe if the lamb had taken my father instead of the flu, my mother would feel less guilty. She wouldn't think she could have saved him by doing something different. She would have a clear enemy, a clear story. She'd have something interesting to talk about instead of crying over small things she couldn't control. Even writing that makes me feel wrong, not just because it's a cruel thought, but because even back then I knew thoughts like that were dangerous. In our village, you don't involve yourself with the lamb. You don't tempt fate. You don't act like you can argue with whatever rule has been living over us for generations. A boy younger than me, Lars, brought a drawing of the lamb to school once. He showed it off to the boys like it was funny. The girls saw and told our teacher, Miss Norton. She dragged him out and beat him so hard we could hear it from the playground. After that, nobody drew the lamb. Nobody joked about it openly. Nobody said its name too loudly. Kids still found ways to be cruel, though. After that day, people started calling Lars Larmby. Stefan came up with it. He said Lars sounded like a lamb calling for its mother. Everyone laughed, so the name stuck. Lars pretended not to care, but I could see it on his face. I didn't really like Stefan. I didn't really like most of the boys. They were loud, proud of being stupid, proud of not being afraid, or at least proud of pretending. The only person I truly liked was Joachim. Joachim asked me questions about the lamb when other kids acted like the topic was poison. When he asked, it made me feel older than I was, like I knew things other people didn't. Sometimes it made me feel like I knew more than the adults, because the adults refused to talk about it at all. I also liked that sometimes, on Wednesdays, we kissed under the bridge. The bridge was our secret place. It wasn't a big bridge, just a wooden one over a narrow stretch of water that froze most of the year. Under it, the wind didn't bite as hard. The world felt smaller and safer there, like the village couldn't watch us. On the day the lamb took Peter's grandmother, Joachim asked me a question while we sat with our legs hanging over the edge, boots swinging above the snow. Do you like it? He asked. You know, the lamb? I didn't know how to answer. In our village, liking the lamb felt like saying you liked death, but saying you hated it felt dangerous too. like it could hear you. Not sure, I said. I don't hate it. I sort of like it, I guess. It's spooky. Yeah, he said softly. Spooky. I tried to match my breathing to his, the way you do when you want to feel close to someone without saying it. Then he looked up at the pale sky like he expected an answer to drop from it. You think it takes them somewhere exciting? He asked. Somewhere warmer, like a big city? I thought about it longer than I needed to, because I didn't want to sound dumb. I didn't want him to think I was a child. I didn't want him to stop kissing me because he realized I was an idiot. Mm-hmm, I said slowly. I don't think so. I've only ever seen them walk away. It would take too long to get to places like that. He smiled, a real smile, wide and careless. Yeah, you're right, he said. No way Peter's Mormer could walk that far. It's like 1 billion meters away. We both snorted. It was the kind of laugh that felt illegal in a place like ours, where laughter often came with guilt. We sat in silence for a while. Our pinkies touched and then overlapped. The pressure of his gloved finger pushed mine into the snow dust on the wood. She didn't look that sad going, he said after a moment. Most people do. You can always tell they're scared. But her, she wasn't. He hesitated, like the wind could steal his words and carry them to the wrong ears. You think when it's your time, not you, he added quickly. But like if it was, would you just know where you're going? Where it's taking you? I stared at the snow below the bridge. My mouth opened and closed. I couldn't answer, so I did the worst thing I could have done. I stood up and left. I told myself it was because I didn't want to say something stupid, that I didn't want him to kiss an idiot. But the truth is, I was scared. His question made the lamb feel real in a way I didn't like. It made me imagine my mother walking away, or Amy. It made the air under the bridge taste wrong. Almost exactly a year after I left Yoakum, sitting there alone, the village lined up along the main road again. Every family stood in their place, 2 lines facing each other like a corridor. It was a day none of us ever prepared for, but all of us recognized the moment it arrived. It sat in the air like a change in pressure, like the sky itself was holding its breath. The lamb came, its small hooves hit the tar in a quick, uneven rhythm, the sound echoing sharp in the cold morning. Its little calls were soft, muffled, almost playful. It moved the way young animals move, like it had no real goal and yet knew exactly what it was doing. It hopped from one side of the road to the other, stopped, stared, forgot what it was staring at, then trotted again as if it had remembered something funny. Watching it felt endless. Its white coat looked too bright against the gray of the day. It drifted between our 2 lines of families, and nobody spoke, not a single word. People stared at the lamb, but also tried not to, as if looking too hard could attract it. We all prayed in our own quiet ways that it would pass us. Then it stopped. It turned calm and sure, and jogged toward Mr. Olafson. The lamb circled his leg like it belonged there, its soft side brushing against his trousers. It looked gentle. It looked harmless. That was what made it worse. The silence around us became heavy, painful. Mr. Olafson let out a small, trembling laugh, like his body didn't know what else to do. Realization spread across his face. His smile faltered. His eyes shone as he looked at the crowd. "It seems my time is up," he said. His voice tried to sound light, but it shook. He looked left and right like he'd forgotten something important and was trying to find it before it was too late. The lamb waited. Mr. Olafson went to his family. He kissed his wife. He hugged his daughters. They clung to him hard, crying loud and ugly, the kind of crying that turns your face into someone else's face. He said quick, loving words to each of them. Then he pulled away. He lifted both hands and waved to us as he followed the lamb down the road. His hands trembled, and we all knew it wasn't the cold. As he passed the end of the line, the last of him disappeared into the white distance. People who hadn't been close enough to see his face cried less, like the weight of it was lighter when it was farther away. Amy gripped my arm tight, her eyebrows pressed together. She stared at his back until he was gone. "It takes anyone," she said. After that, the village felt hollow for months. Adults grieved as if he had died. Girls whispered apologies to his daughters. Are you okay? I'm sorry. Boys huddled together and muttered angry plans and empty curses about the lamb like they were going to fight it with sticks. It all looked pointless to me, like play acting, like a storm of words thrown at something that didn't care. If the lamb was just taking him, why did everyone act like he was dead? Why did we grieve something we always let happen? Why did we let it take people we loved? Those questions followed me back to the bridge, but the bridge didn't feel safe anymore. Joachim was there sometimes. When I brought up those questions, he looked down like he felt guilty for existing. My questions sank into the snow between us, unanswered. The silence grew teeth. The bridge started to taste like fear instead of sweetness. I would be lying if I said none of this changed me. The teasing, the crying, the goodbyes, Amy's strange calm, my mother's constant emotion. It all built up into a heavy, tight feeling inside me, like a knot that never loosened. And the worst part was this. The adults didn't understand it either. You could see it in their eyes. They worried the same way we did, but they hid it under work and prayer and routine. Watching them told me something important. It wasn't going to make sense later. It was going to keep happening. Again and again. And we would keep letting it happen. Not even a single word or wheeze about it. Seasons passed. Cold became harsher cold. Then the snow softened a little. Then it hardened again. Life moved forward the way it always had. Fathers taught sons how to slaughter cattle. Mothers taught daughters to knit thick wool. My family tried to do both, in our way. I spent most days near the fields, but the idea of killing an animal by myself made my stomach twist. Björk noticed. One day he brought us a carcass already skinned and prepared. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He just left it with us like it was normal. I hauled it to my father's shed, the shed that survived winters that broke fences and split trees. My arms were thin and young then, and the weight was almost too much. I dragged and stumbled through the snow, and every time I lost my grip, the cold soaked through my gloves. Björk watched me with soft eyes. He didn't pity me exactly. It was more like understanding. Like he knew what it felt like to be a child forced to act like a man. Amy spent long hours sitting beside our mother trying to knit. Her hands shook. Her stitches were loose and uneven, like a copy of something she couldn't quite manage. Our mother laughed gently and praised her, trying to hide her worry. But it never really worked. Amy couldn't pretend, not even when she tried. Sometimes when Amy went to bed, I sat by the door and watched our mother knit in silence. Her hands moved fast, too fast, as if speed could fix what fear was doing inside her. She was trying to make enough warmth to keep her little girl alive. That was what it was, even if she never said it. Amy stayed wrapped in wool. She ate stew. She slept. I stayed beside her like I promised. I read her stories and told her what the other kids were doing outside. She didn't care much about the stories, but she listened anyway. For me, after a while, as the village got used to Mr. Olafsson being gone, people laughed again. They started to treat the lamb like an ugly memory instead of a constant threat. Adults threw themselves into daily distractions. For 2 years, it stayed that way. Then, 2 days after my 13th birthday, we lined up again. It was earlier than usual. The wind was warmer, like winter hadn't fully decided to return yet. Our cheeks were red from the breeze. We heard the hooves before we saw it. The lamb looked the same as it always did. Bright white, young, like it had just learned how to walk properly and still hadn't mastered it. It trotted down the road, passing family after family. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My shoulders dropped, out of sight, out of mind. But then a ripple moved through the line. Confused murmurs, people shifting on the ice, kids whispering and standing on their toes, adults leaning forward trying to see. Something about it made my chest tighten. I looked at Amy. I tried to give her a look that said it's fine, but my face felt stiff. Then I slipped out of our place and started moving down the line to see who it had chosen. I wore my father's boots that day. They were too big for me, and my feet slid inside them as I walked. Each step was heavy. The snow was half melted and froze again, so the ground was slick and uneven. Between bodies, I saw Lars staring ahead, not at the lamb, not at me, but at something farther down. His face was pale in a way that had nothing to do with cold. That made me walk faster. I got close to the end of the line. I rose up on my toes to see over shoulders, and there, walking behind the lamb with his head down, was Joachim. My knees went loose. For a second, I thought I would fall. I caught myself on the edge of a trash can, my fingers clenching the cold metal. I started moving again, following him from the side, half hidden behind people's coats. I pushed forward until I was directly across from him. "Joachim?" I called. "Joachim!" His head twitched at his name, like his body reacted before his mind did. But he didn't look at me. His chin dropped again, like he was trying to become smaller. The end of the line was coming. I knew once he passed it, I wouldn't be able to follow. Panic rose in my throat. "Joachim, don't go." I didn't care. Then I did. Then I didn't again. The snowbank along the edge of the road was hard and jagged, and I stumbled over it in my father's boots. My breath came out rough and hot. "You can't leave me." More heads turned. Heat climbed up my face, not just from running, but from being seen like that. Joachim still wouldn't meet my eyes. My vision blurred. "Where is it taking you?" I shouted. "Say something." Then his eyes shifted. He looked right at me. He didn't say a word, but I understood anyway. The question he couldn't answer under the bridge a year ago came back and slapped me with the truth. Where he was going didn't require walking much longer. Before I could reach him, someone yanked my collar back hard. Bjork's hand clamped around my coat like a trap. His face was stern, warning, almost angry, but there was fear under it too. I fought his grip like an animal. I twisted and pulled until tears squeezed out of my eyes, my throat burning. I hated that people could see me crying, but I couldn't stop it. Bjork's strength didn't move. Joachim kept walking behind the lamb. On that day, watching him disappear into the cold, I decided something simple and final. I hated that lamb. After Joachim was taken, the class held an overdue going-away party for him. The kind of party our school always forced together using the same decorations and the same donation money they had used for every other kid who had been taken over the years. Names like Lisa Backval, Aaron Nyberg, Erica Hoagland, kids whose seats had been filled by someone else by the next term. The adults called it support and closure. It felt like a lie you were supposed to clap for. I spent the whole party locked in a bathroom stall, sitting on the lid down, crying silently so nobody would hear. Stefan teased me for missing Joachim. I punched him. Someone dragged me away and I got sent home. And at home, I cried again. It felt like everything in the village was one stupid lamb joke away from collapsing. Just before New Year's, Anna Aberg killed herself in the woods behind her house. She left a letter saying she was terrified the lamb would take her next. The next year, people said the lamb stopped beside the Abergam family's place in line and stared, as if looking for someone who should have been there, then moved on and chose Mrs. Lund instead. Rumors like that rot a village from the inside. The Lunds and the Abergs started to feud. One side furious at the accusation, the other side furious at the denial. Both sides heartbroken, so they needed someone to blame. And blame is a kind of fire that keeps you warm for a moment, even while it burns your house down. Through all of it, Amy stayed steady. She didn't cry like my mother. She didn't explode like me. She didn't joke like the other kids. She just held herself together. Looking back, she was stronger than I ever was. Maybe if I had been the strong one, I wouldn't have done what I did later, 3 years later. The day everything ended, the lamb came again, and we lined up again. The breeze was sharp, Fresh snow had fallen and covered yesterday's footprints like they never existed. Families took their usual places. My mother stood on the right side of the road. I stood on the left. Amy stood between us. The last flakes of night still drifted down. Amy stood perfectly still. Only her thin hair moved in the wind. We heard the hooves, faint clacks on the tar. We heard its soft calls. We heard adults go quiet as if someone turned off the village with a switch. People shuffled their feet. Parents grabbed restless children by the shoulders. Everyone looked everywhere except where they wanted to look. The lamb pranced like it always did, uncertain and playful, like it had no idea what it was, like it had never done anything wrong in its life. It stopped near knees and boots, sniffed, twitched, moved on. I took Amy's hand. I had never held her hand like that before. Not in public, not at our age. I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed locked on the lamb. The longer I watched it, the less sense it made. I couldn't understand how something so small controlled us. Why were you here? Why this place? Why us? Then it stopped. Right in front of our family. A few feet away, it stood still. It didn't hop. It didn't play. It didn't look young anymore, even though it looked exactly the same as always. Its little grin felt wrong, like a mask. Its black eyes were shiny and empty. Its coat was too clean, and like a shy toddler, it walked closer. A cold shock ran down my spine. I looked at my mother, pleading without words for her to do something. Anything. But she couldn't. She never could. Her mouth opened slightly. No sound came out. Her eyes searched for help the same way mine did. Then the lamb reached Amy and rubbed its soft head against my sister's leg. Content. Certain. My mind went white with heat. With Amy's hand still in mine, I ran. We pounded through the snow off the side of the road toward the houses. I pulled Amy hard enough that she stumbled to keep up. Behind us, I heard my mother's voice, thin and shaking in the cold. Sven. I couldn't tell if she was begging me to stop or begging me to run faster. I made the choice for her. I was the big brother. I couldn't just stand there and let it happen, not again. People flooded after us, the same people I'd known my whole life. Neighbors, friends, teachers, men who had lifted me up as a baby, women who had brought stew to our house when my father died. They chased us anyway. We slid down a narrow dip into Mr. Eng's yard, stumbled onto hard-packed ground, then ran back onto the road toward our home. Their voices behind us rose into a single messy sound, pleading, shouting, warning. Tools clanked. Boots hit snow. Someone fell and cursed. Someone else cried out a name. We reached the bush beside our yard. I yanked my father's axe from where it was kept, the handle cold and familiar in my gloves. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. We pushed through branches. I tried to remember every path, every angle, every way back to the shed. Then Bjork grabbed my coat and lifted me partly off the ground, like I weighed nothing. "What have you done, boy?" he roared. "Return the girl." I swung the axe without thinking. He reached for it, and the blade nicked his forearm. He cursed and let go, more shocked than hurt. A few drops of blood fell onto the snow like red paint. I hit the ground and scrambled up. I grabbed Amy again and ran. My thoughts weren't thoughts anymore, they were noise. Hot, bright, furious noise. Why come here? Why? Why take people, you stupid animal? Why? Amy cried out to me, pulling in a different direction, as if she knew a better path. We broke into our yard and ran for the shed. I saw people already moving toward our house like they expected us to do exactly this. They had done this before, maybe, in their minds, even if not in real life. They moved like a machine switching on. We got inside the shed and slammed the door. The sound of fists and tools hitting it started almost immediately. And even then, even while they tried to break in, they were still the same people I'd always known. Nothing about their faces was different. They weren't monsters. They weren't strangers. They were frightened. They were desperate. They were angry at me, yes, but also terrified of what would happen if the lamb's choice was stopped. All that fear that lived under our village's quiet surface finally poured out. I covered Amy's ears with my hands, pressing too hard because I didn't know what else to do. She clung to me, her crying mixed with the yelling outside, and I couldn't tell which sound was hers and which sound was everyone else's. Don't let it take me. Please don't let it take me away. Over and over, like a prayer. All I could do was hold her. She couldn't leave. She wouldn't. I wouldn't let it happen. Time turned thick. The walls boomed again and again as tools hit wood. Familiar voices called out, overlapping. Someone shouted my name. Someone cursed me. Someone begged. Someone promised things. Someone cried. My mother's sobs cut through everything. They tore at my chest. I could feel them tearing at Amy, too. But I didn't open the door. I didn't listen. The sun went down. Light inside the shed grew dim, then gray, then almost nothing. Shadows of moving people slid across the cracks in small windows. One by one, the voices outside got tired. Shouts became hoarse. Pleas became quiet. Heavy breathing replaced words. Then, under it all, we heard the lamb. A faint sound, a small call, and the tap of a hoof against the shed door. That tapping slowed. The crunch of footsteps in the snow grew softer, farther away. The village noise faded until there was only a hollow silence left behind, like the world had stepped back to watch. Relief washed over me so fast it made me dizzy. Amy's body shook against mine. My hands were cramped from holding the axe and covering her ears. Sweat chilled on my skin. I kept the axe raised, just in case. I waited longer than I needed to. Then I crept to the small window and looked out. The night was cold and wide. A trail of tiny hoof prints led away into darkness. People stood on both sides of that trail, exhausted, their shoulders slumped, their faces gray with cold and effort. They all looked at me. My stomach turned. I searched for my mother in the crowd. I found her. Her eyes were on Amy first. Then they moved to me. Her face changed slowly, like she was waking up into a nightmare. Her mouth opened. Her skin pulled tight with dread. She looked like someone whose heart had just been ripped out, but whose body hadn't realized it yet. Then she fell to her knees and made a sound I have never heard from a human being before. A deep, breaking wail. She didn't look up again. I didn't understand at first. I still held the axe. I still thought I had won. But no matter how hard I swung, no matter how hard I cried, it didn't change what had already happened. Later that night, we ate Amy. Story 2. I used to think kids' shows were harmless. Loud colors, goofy songs, fake smiles, and costumes that looked like they were made from cheap foam and hot glue. The kind of thing you don't even notice until you're older, walking past a TV in a store, and an old theme song hits you from the toy aisle. For a second, you remember being 5 years old, sitting too close to the screen, believing every bright, friendly thing it showed you. Back then, I also believed you could forget anything if you didn't think about it for long enough. I was wrong about that. I never forgot the fun hour with Gator, no matter how hard I tried. And the worst part is that I don't think it ever forgot me. It started in 1998. I was 11, homesick on a school day, the kind of sick that makes your bones feel hollow. I had a fever that wouldn't settle down, and my skin felt too hot and too cold at the same time. My mom had to go to work. She was the kind of mom who tried to set everything up so I wouldn't need anything while she was gone, even if she was stressed and running late. Before she left, she spread blankets on the couch in the living room so I could stay downstairs where the air was cooler. She gave me cough medicine that tasted like purple sugar and chemicals. She set a plastic bucket on the floor near the couch, just in case, and she kissed my forehead and told me to sleep as much as I could. Then she turned on the TV, because she knew it helped distract me, and she walked out the door a little after 6 in the morning, locking it behind her. The TV volume was low, but I could still hear the cheerful voices and the little sound effects. I lay there under blankets, sweating and shivering, drifting in and out of sleep while cartoons flashed across the screen. I remember thinking that the morning light through the curtains looked too bright, like the whole world was glaring at me. Every so often, I'd wake up with my throat dry and my head pounding. Then I'd fade out again. At some point around 8 or 9, the programming changed. A title card popped up. It wasn't the clean, colorful kind of title card you'd expect. The background was muddy brown, like dirty water. The letters were bright and bold, but the whole thing looked old, like it had been copied too many times. The Fun Hour with Gator. A corny whistle started up, paired with a banjo. The music sounded like it was trying too hard to be happy. A cartoon alligator waddled onto a set that was supposed to look like a swamp. The swamp was painted in bright greens and purples, with fake trees and fake vines, and a shiny blue water area that looked like plastic. Gator himself looked wrong. Not terrifying right away, just wrong in a way my feverish brain couldn't ignore. He was dark green, bulky, and oddly shapeless, like his body didn't have a clear outline. His eyes were bright yellow, too bright, and they didn't blink together. One would close and open, then the other, like two different people were controlling them. His teeth didn't match the rest of him. Everything else looked like a simple cartoon, but the teeth were sharp and realistic, wet-looking like they had saliva on them. He grinned the whole time, and the grin was wide enough that it should have looked silly, but it didn't. He wore suspenders and a floppy straw hat, like a country mascot you'd see at a weird roadside attraction. I remember him turning his head slowly, almost like he could feel me watching. Then he stared straight into the camera, straight into my living room. "Good morning, little critters," he croaked, using a thick southern drawl. His voice didn't match the cheerful music. It sounded rough, like something scraping. "You're looking sick today." That sentence hit me like a bucket of cold water. I stared at the screen, suddenly more awake. My first thought was that I'd heard him wrong. Kids' show characters didn't talk like that. They didn't comment on the viewers. They definitely didn't tell you that you looked sick. I tried to sit up and change the channel. I remember reaching for the remote on the coffee table, but my arms felt heavy and my body felt like it was full of sand. Sitting up made the room tilt and my stomach rolled hard. I managed to grab the remote, but the effort drained me. I pushed a button once, maybe twice, and nothing changed. I don't know if the remote didn't work or if I hit the wrong button. At that point, I was too exhausted to keep trying. So I lay back down and let the show play. It was like any other kid's program on the surface. Gator walked around his swamp set, talking in that scratchy voice. There were props, bright signs, a few silly sound effects that didn't feel like they belonged. Every time the banjo theme played, it made my skin crawl for reasons I couldn't explain. I remember slipping in and out of sleep while it played. The fever made everything feel unreal. The TV light flickered on the walls. The music got louder and softer as I faded. And at some point, without noticing the exact moment it happened, I fell fully asleep. That's when the dream started. In the dream, I was still on the couch, under the same blankets. At first, it felt so normal that I didn't know I was dreaming. Then I realized the living room was dark. Not dim, dark like nighttime, like the lights had been cut. The curtains were still there, but there was no street-light glow, no moonlight, nothing. The air felt thick. It was also completely silent, no cars passing outside, no distant neighbors, no house noises at all. Even my breathing sounded muffled, like the room was padded. The only light came from the television. On the screen, Gator stood alone on his swamp set. The colors looked duller now, like the brightness had been drained out. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there facing forward and the banjo music wasn't playing. Then he turned his head, slowly, carefully, like he was turning toward a sound. But there was no sound. He turned until he was looking to the side, not at the camera anymore, but toward me on the couch. I tried to move. I couldn't. My body felt glued down. Panic rose in my chest, thick and hot. Gator stared at me for a long moment. Then he stepped forward. He didn't jump out of the screen like a cartoon gag. He didn't break the TV glass. He simply reached the edge of the screen and lifted one foot over it, as if the television was an open doorway and the border of the picture was a frame he could step through. The moment his foot touched my living room floor, it made a loud, heavy thud, like something dense dropping onto wood. The sound shook through the room and into my bones. Then the next foot came down. Another thud. Each step was slow, deliberate, like he wanted me to understand exactly what was happening. A smell filled the room, thick and disgusting. Stagnant water, mold, old wet plants, the kind of smell you get when you open a forgotten cooler that's been sitting in heat for days. It was so strong it made my eyes water. He climbed fully out of the television and stood over me, blocking the screen's glow. For the first time, I understood how big he was. The cartoon shape was still there, but the presence felt real, heavy, and close. His hat cast a shadow that hid part of his face, but his yellow eyes shone through it. He crouched beside the couch, his body making the cushions shift slightly, as if his weight affected the real world. Then he leaned in until his mouth was near my ear. "You shouldn't watch things you don't understand," he whispered. His voice was quieter than on the show, but it was worse up close. It wasn't friendly or playful. It sounded personal, like he was talking to me alone, like he had been waiting for this chance. I felt his hand touch the sides of my head, claws pressed into my scalp, sharp points that sank in enough to hurt, but not enough to make me bleed. I could feel each claw separate, like fingers, like a hand shaped wrong. And then he pulled. The pain was instant and impossible. It wasn't like a normal headache or even like getting your hair yanked. It felt like something wet tearing, like pressure building and then ripping, as if the top of my head was being peeled away. My spine felt like it was stretching upward, like my body was being held down while something inside me was being dragged toward the ceiling. I couldn't scream at first. The pain stole the breath from my lungs. My eyes watered so hard it blurred my vision. Then Gator laughed. It wasn't a silly cartoon laugh. It sounded real, like a human laugh coming from a throat that wasn't built right. Deep, wheezing, and strained, like he was laughing through something clogged. Like he was barely able to breathe and still found it funny. That laugh was the last thing I heard before I jolted awake. I screamed so suddenly that my throat tore and my stomach flipped. I leaned over the side of the couch and threw up onto the carpet. It was hot and bitter and made my eyes sting. The room was back to normal daylight. The hum of the house was back. Cars passed outside. The TV was still on, but a different show was playing now, something bright and normal, with no swamp set and no banjo. For a minute, I convinced myself it was just a fever dream. I was sick. I was exhausted. It made sense. My body had cooked my brain into creating something horrible. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. After that day, strange things started happening. At first, it was small enough that I could tell myself I was imagining it. Sometimes, late at night, I would hear a faint banjo tune. Not loud, not clear, just a few notes that seemed to drift in from nowhere. I'd sit up in bed and listen, holding my breath, trying to figure out which room it was coming from. Every time it would fade away before I could locate it. Other times I'd catch flashes of green and reflective surfaces. Not like a clear image, more like a quick smear of color, like someone had moved behind me and the mirror caught it for half a second. I'd spin around and see nothing. But the worst part was the voice. "Hey there, little critter." Sometimes it came from the dark corners of my room. Sometimes it seemed to come from the hallway outside my door. It was always quiet, like someone whispering close to your ear. I'd sit frozen, staring into shadows until my eyes hurt, telling myself it was just the house settling, or my imagination, or leftover fear from a nightmare. Years passed. I grew up. I tried to bury it. I didn't talk about it because it sounded stupid. A scary alligator from a kid's show? Who would take that seriously? When I was a little older, I finally asked friends if they remembered a show called The Fun Hour with Gator. I expected at least one of them to say, "Oh yeah, that weird cartoon." but none of them did. They looked at me like I was making it up. They asked what channel it was on. They joked that I must have dreamed it. I even brought it up to my mom once. She frowned and told me the channel I described didn't even show kids' programs in the morning anymore. Not after 1996. She was sure about it. She said maybe I was mixing it up with something else, or maybe I'd been delirious from my fever. She laughed a little, but not in a mean way. More like she felt bad that I'd scared myself. That made my stomach sink, because I remembered that morning clearly. The blankets, the bucket, the light through the curtains, and that muddy brown title card. One night I sat at my computer and searched for it. I didn't just do one quick search. I searched for hours. I tried different spellings. I tried searching without the title and just descriptions. I looked through old lists of programs. I dug through dusty corners of the internet the way people used to back then, before everything was easy to find. I found almost nothing. Finally, I found a single thread on a very old forum. The site looked ancient, like it had been abandoned for years. The thread title mentioned Gator. My hands went cold when I saw it. There were only 3 posts in the entire thread. The first said, "Did anyone else have nightmares after watching Gator?" The second said, "Don't look him up at night." And the third said, "He comes out of reflective surfaces." I stared at that last sentence for a long time. It felt like someone had written down a rule about something real. It didn't read like a joke. It read like a warning. After that, I couldn't stop noticing reflective surfaces. I'd see him in the bathroom mirror, not fully, just a suggestion, a snout-shaped shadow behind my shoulder, the curve of a grin that vanished when I blinked. Sometimes, when I brushed my teeth, I'd catch a flash of yellow in the mirror and jerk my head up so hard my neck hurt. Nothing would be there when I turned around, but my heart would keep racing like I'd almost been hit by a car. At night, my bedroom window became the worst. When it was dark outside, the glass turned into a mirror. I'd lie in bed and see my room reflected back at me, and in that reflection there would be a darker patch in the corner, as if something was standing where shadows shouldn't gather. If I sat up to look directly, it would be gone. If I looked back at the window reflection, sometimes it would be there again, just for a second. I stopped sleeping well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dream again, only worse. In the newer dreams, Gator didn't just grab my head, he peeled the top off like it was a lid, twisting and pulling while the banjo tune played somewhere behind him. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, pressing my hands to my scalp, half expecting it to be loose. Then came the hallway incident. By the time I was 19, I had almost convinced myself I had some kind of serious mental problem. I'd read about sleep paralysis. I'd read about anxiety and hallucinations. I told myself that childhood fear plus fever could mess someone up for years. I tried to treat it like a personal issue, something I could manage if I ignored it. One night I woke up thirsty just after 2 in the morning. My apartment was dark, the kind of dark where furniture becomes vague shapes. The only clear light was the microwave clock in the kitchen, glowing blue. I remember the numbers because they made me feel anchored to reality, like time itself was proof I wasn't dreaming. I got up and stepped into the hallway. That's when I heard it. A familiar banjo theme, soft but clear, coming from behind me. My body went cold so fast it felt like my blood had turned to ice. I stopped walking. I didn't want to turn around, but I did anyway, slowly, like in a horror movie where you already know what you're going to see. At the end of the hallway stood Gator. He wasn't the normal cartoon version. He was enormous and realistic, like the idea of him had been dragged into the real world and forced to make sense. His head nearly scraped the ceiling. Water dripped from his scales and left dark stains on the carpet. The suspenders hung loose over a body that looked rotting in places, like something that had been submerged too long. His grin was wider than it should have been, stretched like a tear in fabric. His yellow eyes didn't blink. "You're bigger now," he rasped. I didn't think. I ran, I sprinted into my bathroom, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook so badly I almost couldn't turn the lock. I leaned against the sink, trying to breathe, but I was hyperventilating so hard the room started to spin. For a second, I thought I might faint right there. Then came 3 slow knocks on the door. Not banging, not testing. Knocks with patience. "Little critter," he whispered through the wood. Another knock. "I want to get into your head again." My stomach dropped. I backed away until I hit the bathtub. I stared at the doorknob as if staring could keep it still. Then the knob began to turn. It turned slowly with a horrible creaking sound like the metal was complaining. The light above the mirror flickered once, twice, and then went out. The bathroom fell into darkness. After that, my memory breaks up like a damaged tape. I remember the door swinging open even though it was locked. I remember his shadow filling the doorway. I remember that swamp water smell rolling into the bathroom like fog. I remember claws around my skull again, digging in with the same sure grip as in the first dream. Then nothing. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. They told me my neighbors had heard a loud crash and running water. Apparently, I'd passed out in the bathroom and caused a water damage problem, like a sink or tub had overflowed. The details were fuzzy because everyone was talking at me and I felt like I was underwater, barely able to follow what they were saying. A police officer asked me how I'd torn my bathroom door off its hinges. He kept looking at me like he was waiting for a punchline. When I didn't answer, he looked confused and annoyed. Before I was discharged, a doctor examined my head. He asked if I'd been in a fight. He asked if someone had grabbed me. He asked if I'd hurt myself. On the sides of my scalp were 5 deep marks, grooved and bruised, like someone had dug fingers into my head hard enough to leave damage. In my nightmare, those were Gator's claws. To a doctor, they looked like the grip of a human hand, thumb and fingers pressing in too hard. I didn't have a good explanation. I don't think anyone believed my silence was fear. They thought it was embarrassment or drugs or mental illness, maybe all 3. After that, I moved. I told myself a new place would help. New walls, new mirrors, new hallway, new everything. I avoided watching old cartoons. I avoided anything that reminded me of swamp colors or banjo music. I tried to live like a normal person. It didn't stop. Last night, I woke up and saw wet footprints on the floor beside my bed. They were too big to be mine. They looked like something had walked in, stood there for a while, and left. The carpet around them smelled faintly like dirty water. This morning, while shaving, I looked up and saw him in the mirror behind me. Not a full body, not a clear shape, just a bright yellow eye, unblinking, staring out of the dark space behind my shoulder. For a second, I couldn't move. I felt like that 11-year-old on the couch again, trapped under blankets, too weak to reach the remote. When I spun around, there was nothing there. But the mirror still held the feeling of being watched, like the glass remembered him. At this point, I don't think he's just in my head. I don't think it's a memory or a fever dream that stuck around too long. I think he's been trying to pull me somewhere for years, ever since that first morning. Lately, I've been waking up with mud under my fingernails. Real mud, dark and gritty, like soil mixed with swamp water. I don't sleepwalk, at least not that I know of. I don't have a backyard I could have wandered into. And I always lock my doors. I'm afraid to go to sleep now because my dreams are changing. They're less like nightmares and more like invitations. I hear the sound of cheering kids, distant and echoing, like an audience in a studio. I smell that wet, moldy stink. And I see a fake swamp set under harsh lights, brighter than it should be. Gator stands beside a television, grinning, one eye blinking before the other, waiting like he's hosting a show, and I'm the next segment. In the dream, he doesn't come through the screen anymore. He stands back and points at it, like he's giving me my cue, like it's my turn to climb through. Story 3. My first dream in what I started calling the wasteland came about 2 months ago. In that first dream, I was standing barefoot in the middle of a desert under an overcast sky. The sky wasn't full of clouds the way a stormy day usually is. It was just gray, flat and smooth, like someone had pulled a huge gray sheet across the world. The ground beneath me was dry and split open with cracks. Like it had been thirsty for years, I could turn in a full circle and see nothing but more of the same. No plants, no insects, no birds, no distant movement, not even a rock that looked different from the rest. Just empty land and that strange, heavy sky. The air felt wrong, too. It was thick and humid, like rain was about to fall any second, like the whole desert was holding its breath. But nothing ever happened. It stayed still. The humidity just sat against my skin and never turned into anything useful. It didn't cool the land. It didn't bring relief. It didn't change. And somehow, deep down, I had the steady, unshakable feeling that as long as I stood there, rain would never come. I stayed in that dream for a long time. It felt like hours, though I know dreams don't work like that. I didn't do anything at first. I just stood there and stared out into the gray distance until I finally woke up. On its own, it wouldn't have mattered. It wasn't even an exciting dream, not like the kind you tell someone about over breakfast. If I'd had it once, I probably would have forgotten it within a day or two. But I had the same dream again the next night. Then again. For 2 straight weeks, every time I fell asleep, I woke up in that same desert, same sky, same heavy air, same cracked ground under my feet. And the strangest part was that I wasn't confused in the dream the way I usually am when I sleep. I knew I'd been there before. I knew it was a dream. I remembered lying down in my bed and closing my eyes. I remembered waking up in the morning afterward, but the wasteland felt real anyway. The dirt hurt my feet. The dry ground pushed against my soles like tiny stones, even though it looked like nothing but cracked clay. The air pressed against my bare skin and made me feel exposed, like I didn't even have privacy inside my own head. I was naked in that place, not in a sexual way, just in a helpless way, like the world had stripped everything down to the most basic facts. Me alone, a dead land, a sky that refused to do what it promised. By the 3rd night, I got tired of standing still. I started walking forward, just to see if anything changed. I remember thinking it was pointless, because in a dream you can walk forever and still be in the same spot. But I did it anyway. For night after night, it seemed like I made no progress at all. Every time I fell asleep, I'd open my eyes and I'd be right back there, in what felt like the same place. No landmarks, no sun, no shadows to measure time. It was possible I was moving and just couldn't tell. There was no way to prove it. Still, something in me kept trying, like I could wear a path into the emptiness if I walked long enough. It went on like that until one night, when I finally saw something new. In the dream, I had been walking for a long time and I felt worn out in a way that didn't make sense. My muscles burned, my legs felt heavy, like I'd been hiking all day. I sat down on the cracked ground and just stared out at the horizon, letting the thick air sit on me. That's when I noticed it to my left, far in the distance. At first it looked like a smudge against the gray, like my eyes were playing tricks on me. But then it sharpened into something with shape and mass, something that didn't belong in a world that had been nothing but flat land. It was a mountain. No, calling it a mountain didn't feel right. It was too tall, too clean. Even from that distance, I could tell it rose higher than anything I'd ever seen in real life. It climbed up and up until it disappeared into the gray ceiling above, like it was cutting into a solid lid. The shape looked almost perfect, like a pyramid drawn by a child who believed the world should be simple, a strong, clean triangle pointing straight up. I couldn't make out details from that far away. I couldn't tell what it was made of, or whether it had cliffs, caves, trees, anything. But the sight of it hit me like a shock. It was the first time the wasteland had offered proof that it had more to it than endless emptiness. I stood up immediately and started walking toward it. When I woke up that morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I could still see it in my mind, that impossible pyramid shape reaching into the gray. All day it sat behind my thoughts, like a word on the tip of my tongue I couldn't say out loud. That was also the day people started noticing something was wrong with me. I didn't realize it until I caught my reflection in a window. My face looked tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. My eyes were dull, my skin looked tight, and my posture was slumped like I'd been doing hard labor. Friends asked if I was sick. A coworker asked if I'd been staying up too late. I told them I was fine and blamed it on bad sleep, but they didn't look convinced. They dropped it anyway, like they were being polite, like they could tell pushing me would make it worse. Later that day, one of my friends pulled me aside. His name was Jamie. He didn't start with small talk. He just looked at me carefully and asked almost casually if I'd been having any strange dreams lately. The question made my stomach twist. I didn't know why. It wasn't like I'd signed a contract not to talk about dreams, but something about the wasteland felt private in a way I can't fully explain. It felt like my own hidden room. Letting someone else see it, even through words, felt like opening a door that shouldn't be opened. I hesitated, and Jamie must have noticed because he kept his voice calm. He said he'd been having dreams that left him exhausted, like he hadn't rested at all. Dreams that felt too real. I still didn't answer until he mentioned a desert. He said it carefully, like he wasn't sure how it would sound out loud. He said he kept finding himself in a dry, empty place with a strange sky. That was when the cold went through me. We talked for a while after that, quietly, comparing details. The cracked earth, the heavy air, the feeling of time stretching out forever, the way you knew it was a dream, but you still felt every step like it mattered. Jamie looked just as unsettled as I felt, and I could tell he was relieved not to be alone. I didn't tell him about the mountain. I'm not proud of that. I don't know why I kept it to myself. Part of me thought it would sound crazy. Part of me thought if I spoke it out loud, it would become more real. And part of me had a strange, selfish feeling that the mountain was meant for me first, like it was a message delivered to my eyes only. A few nights later, I got closer to it. In the wasteland, the mountain stopped being a distant shape and started becoming a real place. I could see its surface now, and that only made it more disturbing. A natural mountain should have rough faces, broken lines, signs of erosion. This one looked too smooth. Its sides were clean, with only a few faint marks here and there. It rose out of the desert like it had been built, not formed. The closer I got, the more certain I became that there was no life anywhere around it. No shrubs, no birds circling, no insects humming. Just dead ground and that huge, silent structure waiting ahead. Then something happened that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. I blinked. That's it. I just blinked, like anyone does without thinking. And when my eyes opened again, there was a hut in front of me that hadn't been there before. It wasn't far away either. It sat a short distance ahead, as if it had been waiting just outside my vision and had stepped forward the second I wasn't looking. There was no sound of it appearing, no dust shifting, no sign it had moved or landed. It was simply there, like it had always been there, and my brain was only just now allowed to notice it. I stopped walking. The hut was old, the kind of old you can feel in your teeth. The boards were gray and split, eaten through by weather and time. There were cracks and holes everywhere, enough that I couldn't understand how the walls still stood. The roof was flat, like someone had built the simplest shelter possible and then forgotten it in the desert for 100 years. It looked like a wooden box with a door. I approached slowly, half expecting it to vanish if I got too close, but it stayed solid. I leaned toward the doorway and looked inside. Light filtered through the holes in the walls, weak and dusty. The floorboards were smoother than the walls, worn down like feet had walked over them for years. In places, the floor dipped and sagged like it was tired of holding itself up. I stepped inside. For a moment, I just stood there, looking around with the uneasy curiosity you get when you find a room you weren't supposed to find. There was no furniture, no tools, no bed, nothing that explained who would live here or why. But the worn floor made it hard to believe the hut had always been empty. I remember thinking very clearly that maybe the wasteland wasn't as lifeless as it seemed. Maybe something had been here before me. Maybe there were rules and I'd been walking through them without understanding. I turned back toward the door, and that was when I got my answer. A raven stood in the doorway. It was too big. That was the first thing my mind latched onto because it couldn't accept anything else. It stood about 3 feet tall, with wings that looked wide and strong enough to lift something heavy. Its feathers were black, but not the simple black of a normal bird. In the dim light, they looked almost purple, like oil catching a faint reflection. The raven's head was bowed low, its beak pointing at the floor. It wasn't looking at me. It was staring down like it was studying the grain of the wood, focused on something tiny and important that I couldn't see. I'd never spoken in the wasteland before. I don't know why. Maybe I hadn't wanted to hear my voice in that heavy air. Maybe I'd been afraid the sound would attract something. But standing there in that hut, with that huge bird blocking the exit, I found myself speaking anyway. I asked it where it came from. My voice came out as a whisper. The air felt like it swallowed the sound before it could travel. Even so, I heard the fear in it. The raven opened its beak, and a voice came out, low, rough, and painfully tired. "You were not supposed to be here yet," it said. I froze. I don't know what I expected. Silence, maybe, or a bird's caw. But hearing words in that place made my mind tilt. It wasn't just that the raven could speak, it was the feeling behind its voice. It sounded like someone who had been waiting too long. Someone who had watched hope die slowly and had gotten used to the taste of it. I swallowed and forced myself to answer. "When was I supposed to be here?" I asked. "Not yet, not before, but after," the raven replied. "After what?" I asked. My heart was beating hard. Should I have stayed out of the hut? Did I do something wrong? The raven shook its head, slow and strange, and kept its eyes on the floor. It still wouldn't look at me. "Not till after all things," it said. Not till long after they woke up. Not till long after the one that watches began and ceased the viewing. I stood there feeling stupid and small, trying to fit those words together into something that made sense. They didn't. They sounded like the kind of sentence you'd find in a prophecy, something meant to be confusing until it was too late. I tried anyway. "Where should I go now that I'm here?" I asked. "Should I go to the mountain?" "The mountain is the end," the raven said. "But every end needs a beginning." I stared at it. "Where's the beginning?" I asked. "You will find the beginning soon enough," it replied. "That is the only way the end may take place." Then the raven turned, still with its head down, and stepped back out into the wasteland. It spread its wings, and for a second they filled the doorway like a pair of dark doors opening. It took off without effort, rising into the gray air and heading toward the mountain. I ran out after it, but I was too late. I watched it glide away, a black shape cutting across the dead sky until it became a speck, and then nothing at all. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat. It was early morning, light leaked through my curtains, and I got up immediately and closed them, shutting the brightness out. My dark room felt safer, like it could hide me. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, breathing slowly, trying to calm my heart. I didn't know why the raven scared me so much. It hadn't threatened me, it hadn't attacked, it hadn't even looked at me. But its words left a cold feeling in my chest, like I'd accidentally walked into the middle of something huge that had been going on without me. I thought about questions I should have asked. Who was the one that watches? What did it mean began and ceased the viewing? Who were they that woke up? What was I doing there at all? But even as I thought it, I knew questions would only lead to more questions. And some part of me didn't want answers. Answers would mean responsibility, and I didn't feel ready for any of it. That morning, I called Jamie. He picked up, and he tried to sound normal, but I could hear the tiredness in his voice. It was the same tiredness I'd seen on my own face. We talked for a minute, and then he said, like he was trying not to panic, that he could see a mountain in his dream now. My grip tightened on the phone. I told him that was interesting, that maybe it meant things were changing. I kept my tone light and didn't tell him about the hut or the raven. I told myself I was protecting him, letting him find things in his own time. But if I'm honest, I think I just didn't want to be responsible for what he did with the information. He was going to sleep again eventually. He was going to keep walking. He was going to reach whatever was waiting out there, whether I hung up. I stayed home all day. I didn't have anywhere I needed to be, and even if I did, I don't think I could have handled it. I showered longer than usual, letting hot water run over my face while I tried to think through the raven's words. The beginning, the end, the one that watches. It played in my mind like a phrase in a song you can't stop hearing. That night, I tried to fall asleep early, but I couldn't. I lay there listening to the quiet of my apartment, waiting for that moment when sleep finally pulls you under. It didn't happen for hours. When I finally drifted off, it was well after midnight. I opened my eyes in the wasteland again, but I wasn't inside the hut this time. I was standing outside it, and the mountain loomed in front of me. Up close, it looked even more unnatural. It swallowed the horizon, its smooth sides disappearing into the gray ceiling like it was holding the sky up. But something was different. There was a breeze. It came from behind me, soft and steady, and it carried a smell that didn't belong in the desert. It was salty and rotten at the same time, like seaweed and wet stone, like a shoreline at low tide where things have been left to decay. I turned toward the wind. Far behind me, in the direction I'd come from, something faint glimmered in the distance. It looked like a thin line catching light, like water. I stood between the hut and the mountain, looking back and forth. The mountain pulled at me heavy with meaning, like a final destination. But the breeze behind me felt like a hand on my shoulder, guiding me away. The raven's words came back. The mountain is the end, but every end needs a beginning. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. Whatever was behind me was the beginning. So I turned my back on the mountain and started walking into the wind. I walked longer than I ever had in the wasteland. It felt like days. Time stretched the way it always did there, making every step feel like part of a punishment. I grew tired, but I never became thirsty. My mouth didn't dry out. My stomach didn't ache. The wasteland didn't give me mercy, but it didn't give me normal human limits either. It only gave me distance. The smell grew stronger until it filled my nose and throat. Eventually, the land ahead darkened, and the cracked earth began to look damp, like something had soaked into it. Then I saw it. A shoreline. It didn't make sense. Not in a desert that had no plants and no clouds and no rain. But there it was, a jagged stretch of land meeting water. Waves rolled in gently, and the water was black, perfectly black, like ink. Where it touched the shore, it bled into the dry ground, staining it darker. I stood there staring, and then I saw shapes out in the water. 7 figures, standing still. At first I thought they were rocks sticking out of the sea. Then my eyes adjusted, and I realized they were not rocks. They were bodies. They stood separate from each other, spaced out like they were placed there on purpose. They were tall, too tall. Their skin was as black as the water, so at first it was hard to see where they ended and the sea began. Their arms hung down in long, loose lengths, dangling too low, so low that the water touched their fingers even though their shoulders sat high above the waves. From where I stood, I couldn't be sure, but they looked at least 9 feet tall. Their heads were bowed, the same way the ravens had been, but their head shape was wrong. Flat, wide, and drooping forward, like the face of a flower hanging down at night. I couldn't see any features while they stared into the water. They seemed asleep. But my body didn't believe that for a second. Fear hit me so fast it felt like a physical blow. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. The simplest animal part of my brain screamed at me to run. Fight or flight, and there was nothing to fight. I stood frozen on the shore, trying to decide whether to back away quietly or call out or do anything at all. Then one of them moved, slowly, One of the figures lifted its head and looked directly at me. Its face was almost blank, just a flat surface shaped wrong for any living thing. The only real features were its eyes, two enormous eyes set slightly off-center as if they'd drifted out of place. They were white, bright, and clean like polished bone, and in the middle of each was a tiny black pupil, like a pinhole punched through paper. It stared at me, and I couldn't look away. It felt like being seen by something that didn't just notice your body, but noticed the part of you that thinks and remembers and hopes. Then it raised one long arm and pointed at me. A mouth opened on its flat face as if it were being drawn there in real time. The mouth was crooked, uneven, and filled with jagged teeth that didn't match each other. Too many teeth. Teeth stacked behind teeth, like a mistake that kept repeating. And it screamed. The sound was sharp and high and unbelievably loud. It cut through the heavy air and hit me in the chest. The moment that scream left it, the other 6 figures snapped their heads up in the exact same way, like puppets yanked by strings. All of them turned their pale eyes toward me at once. That was all it took. I ran. I spun away from the shoreline and sprinted back across the cracked earth, my feet slamming into the ground, my lungs working hard. I didn't scream at first because I didn't want to waste breath. I could hear splashing behind me, water being thrown into the air as the figures moved. Then came the pounding of feet, huge footsteps hitting the ground, faster than mine. I tried to force myself to wake up. I told myself it was a dream, that I could break out of it if I tried hard enough. Nothing happened. The wasteland stayed solid beneath my feet, and the sound of pursuit grew louder. I kept running until a shadow fell over me, and then a hand, cold and strong, grabbed my shoulder. I hit the ground with a burst of pain and dust. That's when I screamed. I fought like an animal, kicking and twisting, but the thing pinned me down with easy strength. Its weight was wrong, heavy, but not like muscle, more like the others reached me a second later. Hands grabbed my arms, my legs, my chest, pushing me into the dirt as if they wanted to press me into the earth and keep me there. Up close, they were worse. Their faces were flat and warped, not shaped for expressions, but still somehow full of hunger. Their eyes were too wide and too white, like fine porcelain with tiny black holes in the center. Their mouths hung open now, all of them visible, as if they were breathing hard, showing rows and rows of uneven teeth. There were so many teeth that made my brain recoil. No creature should have that many. It looked like something trying to imitate a mouth without understanding the point of it. They stared at me like I was the first interesting thing they'd seen in a very long time. Then, in perfect unison, they leaned down toward me and opened their mouths wider, and they screamed again. The sound was worse up close. It wasn't just loud, it felt like it was inside my skull, drilling into my ears, shaking my thoughts apart. My vision blurred. I felt like my eardrums were tearing. I couldn't even hear my own screaming over theirs. And then, finally, I woke up. I came out of sleep like I'd been thrown. I was screaming, thrashing on my bed, clawing at my sheets as if they were hands holding me down. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would break something. When it stopped, I lay there shaking. I cried, not quietly, not neatly, just the kind of crying that happens when your body doesn't know what else to do with terror. After a long time, I got up and took a shower. The water didn't make me feel clean. It just helped me breathe. I told myself it was a nightmare, just a nightmare. My mind had taken a weird dream and turned it into something ugly, like minds do. I tried to believe that until I left my apartment. I went down to the subway station, and the moment I stepped onto the platform, I felt it. That same pressure I'd felt under their eyes, the certainty of being watched. I stopped and looked around. The platform wasn't crowded. There were a few people, but they were scattered, staring at their phones, waiting for the train. Nobody looked at me. Nobody acted strange. But the feeling didn't go away. It crawled up the back of my neck and made the hairs stand up. I turned my head slowly, searching the shadows across the tracks. And I saw it, on the far side, partly hidden where the lights didn't reach well, A tall, thin figure stood perfectly still. At first, it looked like a trick of darkness, a person shaped by shadow. Then its eyes opened, white, almond-shaped, with tiny black pupils. For a second, I couldn't move. My body locked up as if my brain had hit an emergency stop. It was real. It wasn't in the wasteland. It wasn't behind a dream. It was here, on the other side of the tracks, staring at me like it had been waiting. I ran. The train arrived as I moved, roaring into the station, and for a moment it became a wall between me and the thing across the way. I didn't stay to see if it moved. I bolted up the stairs and out of the station, my lungs burning, my mind screaming the same thought over and over. It followed me. It followed me out. I ran all the way home, half expecting to hear heavy footsteps behind me at any second. When I got to my building, I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook so badly I could barely work the lock. I dragged a dresser over and shoved it against the door, then backed away, listening. Silence. But silence didn't help. Silence just gave my fear room to grow. At some point in the panic of running, I lost my phone. I must have dropped it somewhere without noticing. I couldn't call anyone. I couldn't text. All I could do was sit at my computer and email everyone I could think of, trying to explain something I couldn't even explain to myself. I emailed Jamie. I don't know if he'll answer. I don't know if he can. I'm afraid that if he's reached the hut, if he's found the raven, if he's followed the wind the way I did, then maybe he's already been seen. I've pulled my curtains shut. I've pushed furniture against my bedroom door. I'm sitting in the dark, listening for sounds that aren't there yet. But I can feel them. That's the worst part. Even when nothing moves, even when the room is still, I feel eyes on me, huge, empty, bright eyes that don't blink. Watching from somewhere I can't see. Watching with patience, like time doesn't matter to them. I'm certain it's only a matter of time before they come back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But I know what I saw in that station, and I know what I felt when those 7 faces looked at me across the black water. They saw me, and now they won't stop. I don't know what I stepped into. I don't know what kind of evil lies in that wasteland, or what the mountain is, or what the raven meant by the one that watches. All I know is that something is watching me through those white, haunting eyes, and I don't think there's any way to make it look away. Story 4. This lamp has to be haunted. It's not the kind of lamp you expect to be haunted either. When people talk about cursed objects, they usually mean something old, something with history. A dusty thing from a different century, stitched with beads, dragged through estate sales, built before electricity was even safe. A lamp that looks like it has already watched too much. But this isn't that. This is a modern and lamp. Clean lines, matte metal, minimalist design. The sort of thing you buy because it makes your living room look like a catalog. We bought it today, in broad daylight, in a bright showroom surrounded by other bright, normal objects. And even before we paid for it, I knew something about it wasn't right. I've always been particular about color, but particular doesn't really cover it. If a pot is the wrong shade of yellow, too warm, too lemon, too dull, I won't simply think, that's not my favorite. I'll think about it until it becomes physical. It sits in my head like a pebble in a shoe. I'll be in bed, staring at the ceiling, and the wrong yellow will appear behind my eyes as clearly as a warning light. If I can't fix it, I can't rest. I've learned that about myself the hard way. I have thrown away perfectly good things because of tiny differences nobody else could see. Entire dish sets, not because they were damaged, not because they were cheap, but because the white had the wrong undertone. Curtains that were close enough, according to everyone who had to live with me. Clothes that fit me and looked fine in photos, but felt wrong because the fabric caught the light in a way I didn't like. It's wasteful, I know that. People love to call it that. But it isn't careless. It's more like a sensitivity I never asked for. I notice when something is slightly off, crooked by a fraction, cooler in tone than the rest of the room. textured in a way that doesn't match. When that happens, my brain won't let it go. It circles the problem again and again, like it's trying to worry it into submission. I don't think I could ever live with roommates. Not unless they were willing to let me curate their entire existence. None of their belongings would survive my need to fix things. I would swear I was helping. They would swear I was ruining their life. And of course, like most people with a secret they know would make them look insane, I didn't tell my boyfriend any of this before we moved in together. I didn't tell him about the color paranoia, the way I notice framing, spacing, contrast, balance, the way a single object can make a whole room feel wrong to me, and how that wrongness can feel like a threat. I didn't tell him because he had somehow decided I was the right person for him, and I didn't want to see that decision flicker with doubt. Thankfully, he didn't bring much when he moved in. A few boxes, some books, a kettle. I replaced that kettle within a week. I don't even know if he noticed. Most days I can swallow the discomfort and act normal. I can say things like, "This looks nice," and mean it, at least partially. I can tell myself I'm being dramatic when the curtains don't fall the way I want them to. I can breathe through the urge to reorganize the entire living room because a single picture frame feels too heavy on one side. So when we went to Modern & Co. today, I expected the usual. I expected to walk around, judge everything silently, and come home with nothing, because nothing would be right. But then I saw the lamp. It was exactly the hue of burgundy I have been wanting. Not a purple burgundy, not a red burgundy. The exact, deep, dark, wine-like shade that looks rich without being loud. The shade that makes a room feel warm without making it feel crowded. The shade was only part of it. The design was clean and sharp, sleek, modern, with a triangular cover that looked like it had been drawn with a single confident line. For weeks I'd been searching online, saving images, trying to describe what I wanted without sounding ridiculous. I had pictured something like this long before Modern & Co. released it. Seeing it in person felt like being answered. Even the price was so high that my boyfriend's eyebrows shot up when he saw it. His mouth opened like he was going to protest. Then he looked at me, at my face, at the way I'd stopped moving in the middle of the aisle, and he closed his mouth again. I could tell he wanted to make me happy. I could tell he was thinking, she rarely wants anything this much. Maybe it's worth it. So we bought it. The entire time, some small part of me kept whispering that it was wrong. Not wrong in color, not wrong in shape, not wrong in quality. There wasn't a scratch on it. The metal was perfect. The shade was flawless. It didn't wobble. It didn't look cheaply made. It didn't have that mass-produced sadness some furniture has, where you can almost feel the shortcuts in the material. It was perfect. And still, something inside me resisted it like an allergy. I kept trying to find a reason. I stared at it from different angles, like I could catch the flaw if I looked hard enough. Maybe it was a little too tall. Maybe the burgundy was slightly different under warm light. Maybe the proportions were off by a tiny amount, the way a face can be technically symmetrical and still feel unsettling. But it held up. It was exactly what I would have chosen. That was the worst part. I had no excuse. We got it home, set it up, and placed it near the living room wall, close enough to the couch to be useful, but not in the way. The space looked better immediately. The room looked finished. My boyfriend stood back and nodded, satisfied, like we'd completed a small adult milestone together. And I nodded too. I smiled. I acted like I wasn't listening to the quiet, constant warning inside my chest. All afternoon, I forced myself to ignore the feeling. I refused to mention it. I refused to let myself become the kind of person who says, a new lamp feels bad. I didn't want to be the woman who buys a designer lamp and then decides it's haunted. I didn't want to be the kind of girlfriend who makes her boyfriend regret moving in. My pride carried me through dinner. It carried me through a movie. It carried me through brushing my teeth while the lamp waited in the living room like it belonged there. But when we went to bed and the lights went out, I couldn't fall asleep. At first, I told myself it was normal. I was overtired. I'd had too much screen time. I was excited about the purchase. I was thinking about money. I was thinking about work tomorrow. I went through the usual list of explanations people use when they don't want to admit the truth. Then the feeling shifted. It wasn't just general anxiety. It had a shape. The lamp was down the hall, in the living room. The door was open. I could picture it exactly where we'd left it. I could picture its triangular shade and its slim body standing still in the dark. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. But I felt it the way you feel someone standing too close behind you. A presence that doesn't need sound or movement to announce itself. Outside the window, cars passed now and then, and their headlights threw soft moving light across the walls. Each time it happened, the shadow of the lamp shifted slightly. The triangular top stretched across the room. The body narrowed into a line. The shadow moved like a slow gesture. It looked like something breathing. I lay there, frozen, trying to tell myself it was nothing. A lamp is a lamp. It doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have intention. And yet the thought came anyway, simple and certain. It is thinking, planning, waiting for me to stop watching it. I tried to close my eyes. My heart picked up. My mind started to race in a way that didn't feel like my usual overthinking. It felt like panic with a direction. I kept seeing the lamp in my mind more clearly than the dark ceiling above me. I realized my body had made a decision before I did. I sat up. My boyfriend turned slightly, still asleep. His breathing stayed slow and steady, as if nothing in the apartment had changed. That made it worse, somehow. Like I was the only one who could sense what was wrong. I got out of bed, pulled on my robe, and walked down the hall. I tried to walk quietly, not because I thought I would wake him, but because some part of me was convinced the lamp would hear me, that it would register my movement like a person would. The living room was darker than the bedroom, the kind of darkness that turns familiar furniture into stranger shapes. The couch looked too large. The coffee table looked like a low black slab. The corners of the room seemed deeper than they should be. And there it was. The lamp stood where we left it, perfectly still, perfectly upright. No movement, no sound. Nothing to point at and say, "See, that's the problem." I walked closer, slowly, like you approach an animal that might bite. The lamp's shade was a deep burgundy, even in the dark, absorbing what little light there was. The triangular top angled down, and the thin stand disappeared into the base. It looked, in a way I hadn't noticed before, like a figure, like a person made wrong. An almost human shape with an oversized, triangular head and a body that was too narrow, too neat, too straight. It didn't have a face, but I found myself staring at it as if it did. My own reflection was faint in the metal, warped and thin. I stopped a few feet away and just stood there. I became aware with a sinking embarrassment that I was watching a lamp at 1 a.m. 1:30, actually. The clock on the microwave glowed green. The apartment was silent except for the fridge humming in its usual way. Why couldn't I go back to bed? Why couldn't I just turn around and lie down next to my boyfriend and let my mind shut off? Something must be wrong with me, I thought. Maybe stress was finally catching up. Maybe I'd read too many scary stories as a kid and my brain still had that old superstition wired into it. Maybe the shape of the shade was triggering some primal fear response, the way certain silhouettes do in the dark. But the feeling wouldn't lift. A thought came to me that was so strong it felt like an urge. Take it outside. Right now, put on shoes, carry it out, leave it on the curb. Let it be someone else's problem. Make up a story later, maybe a break-in, maybe some weird thief who only steals lamps. Something ridiculous that sounded less ridiculous than the truth. I tried to laugh at myself, but my mouth was dry and the sound wouldn't come. My eyes stayed on the lamp. There was a switch on it, small and clean, part of the modern design. A switch that suddenly seemed less like a feature and more like a trigger. My hand moved before I fully decided to move it. I stepped forward. The closer I got, the more I felt that I was stepping into its space. Like it had a space. Like it owned the air around it. I reached out and grabbed the metal frame, steady and cool under my fingers, And then, without warning, something clicked inside my mind. Not the lamp. Me. Understanding landed so hard it was like being hit. I understand it, I thought. I understand the lamp. I am the lamp. The world shifted, cleanly and completely, like a light turning. I was suddenly aware of myself from the outside, and the sensation was wrong in a way I can't describe without sounding insane. My body felt unfamiliar. Too tall, too soft, too unstable. My arms looked like thin pieces attached to a larger frame. My head felt small, round, exposed. I tried to pull back, but the pulling back didn't happen the way it should. The idea of moving didn't match what my body did. My balance tilted. My feet suddenly seemed ridiculous. Two narrow supports with no proper base, as if a strong breeze could knock me over. I looked at the lamp. No, I looked at myself. The lamp was looking at me the way I had been looking at it. And in that moment, the shape I'd been afraid of rearranged itself in my mind. The figure wasn't the lamp at all. The figure was me, this human thing with a head perched on a body, balancing on legs that had no wide base, arms that reached out like sticks, eyes set into a face like two little bulbs. The lamp's presence filled the room, calm and certain. It took a good look at me, and I stared back. I could see it clearly now, in a way that made everything else feel like a misunderstanding I'd been living inside. I had thought the lamp looked unnatural, but compared to it, I was the unnatural one. The lamp moved, not with a flicker, not with a tremble, but with simple confidence. It leaned toward me as if I weighed nothing. Its triangular shade dipped, and in that angle there was attention, decision, control. Something gripped me. Hands, I thought, but the thought didn't fit. There were no hands. There was only the lamp's steady hold, as firm as a clamp, as casual as a person lifting a bag. I tried to speak. I tried to shout. My throat tightened and produced a sound that didn't feel like a sound. It felt like air scraping past something that wasn't built for it. The lamp lifted me off the floor. My feet left the carpet and panic surged through me so hard I felt dizzy. I flailed, but my arms moved awkwardly as if they weren't meant for purposeful motion. The room swung, the ceiling tilted, the corners stretched. The lamp carried me toward the door. I was being carried the way you carry an object, the way you carry something that belongs somewhere else. I hit the door frame. My shoulder caught hard, and pain shot through me. The lamp didn't slow. It didn't hesitate like a person would. It didn't apologize. It moved with the steady force of something that had already decided. In the hallway, I hit the wall. Then the railing. My body knocked against the stairs as we descended, bumping and scraping. Each impact jarred me, made my teeth clack. I tried to hold myself together, but I couldn't find the right muscles. I couldn't coordinate. I couldn't make my body do what I wanted. I tried to scream again, and this time something came out. Thin, broken, desperate. A sound that didn't seem loud enough for the fear I felt. Someone opened a door on one of the floors. A man's voice complained, annoyed and sleepy, like I was nothing more than noise in the building. I saw a sliver of light, a face half hidden, eyes narrowed. For a second, hope flared so strongly I thought it might burn through the nightmare. I tried to reach for him. I tried to make him see me, but the lamp moved past him like he wasn't there. The door began to close, the light vanished, and then we were outside. Cold air hit my face. The night smelled like damp concrete and car exhaust. A streetlight buzzed somewhere above, and the curb waited like a boundary. The lamp set me down on the sidewalk with the same lack of ceremony a person uses when placing a box on the ground. My legs crumpled under me because I couldn't hold myself up properly. I fell onto my side, robe twisted, skin against gritty pavement. I looked up. The lamp stood over me for a moment, framed by the building entrance. It looked taller outside, sharper, more certain. The burgundy shade drank in the streetlight and gave back nothing. It turned its attention to me, and although it still had no face, I knew it was looking directly into mine. Then it smiled. I don't know how else to say it. It smiled a cold, fluorescent smile. Bright in the wrong way, too clean, too flat. Not a human smile. A smile that felt like the click of a switch. It held that smile long enough for me to understand one final thing. It wasn't afraid of me. It had never been afraid. It had been waiting. Then it turned away from me like I was already discarded. It walked back into the building, calm as anything, and the door swung shut behind it. I lay on the curb, trembling, staring at the entrance where it had disappeared, and I tried to scream again, but all I could think was that the living room would look perfect now. Perfect and balanced, as if I had been the wrong object in the room all along. Story 5. Every summer, I go to my dad's place. It's out in the woods, not far from a creek that never really shuts up. During the day, it feels normal, quiet, green, a little boring in the way country places can be. But at night, the darkness comes in hard, like it has weight. The trees turn into a wall. The hill behind the deck drops away into nothing. If you stand out there too long, it starts to feel like the night is leaning forward, listening. I have a routine when I'm there. Every night, without thinking, I turn on the porch light. I drag the same chair close to the back door. I keep the back door open and leave only the screen door between me and the inside of the house, like that thin netting could count as safety. I sit where the light hits the wooden boards, and I vape until my chest stops feeling tight. The only sounds are the creak and the little mechanical click from the vape. Click, inhale, exhale, again and again until the taste of mint starts to feel like it's coating my tongue. Out past the edge of the deck, the light can't reach. The stairs disappear into darkness. The tops of the pine trees catch a little shine from the porch bulb, but everything underneath is just black. A big empty space where your imagination starts making its own pictures. Sometimes, in that black space, I see them. 2 perfectly round eyes, not glowing like an animal's eyes, not reflecting like a deer caught in headlights, just 2 clean circles of darkness that still somehow catch the porch light, like the light is afraid to touch them. I've lived in the country before. I've seen raccoons and foxes and deer. I know what animal eyes look like at night. These were wrong, too even, too close together, too much like a face that was meant to be looking at you. The first time I saw them, I was leaning over the railing during a smoke break, staring out into the trees like I always did. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just letting the night drain the stress out of me. Then I caught a movement below, down past the steps and the slope. At first I thought it was just the creek light shifting, or maybe my eyes playing tricks. But the eyes held steady, and after half a second I realized what I was seeing. It was looking back, my shoulders locked up like someone had grabbed them. My throat tightened so fast it felt like I couldn't swallow. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stared at those 2 circles in the dark, and something in me knew in a way that didn't need proof, that if I moved too suddenly, whatever it was might move too. So I went slow. My feet pulled me backward, inch by inch. My back bumped the screen doorknob and it stabbed into my spine. The pain shot up and made my face twist, but I still couldn't look away. My eyelids started to burn from holding open so long. My hands shook as I felt for the handle, fumbling with the door like my fingers didn't belong to me. There were 2 barriers, screen door and the real door, and in that moment they felt like the only thing keeping me alive. I finally got the inside door open and stumbled through. The second the wood shut behind me, my lungs unlocked and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. A small cloud of vapor escaped my mouth. It turned into a cough that hurt my chest. "I told you to quit," my dad said right on cue from the kitchen, like he had been waiting for the sound of me coughing. He was closing the fridge, moving like it was any other night. "There's something out there," I managed, clearing my throat. My voice came out thin. "I don't think it's an animal." He just gave a short nod and walked past me like he believed me enough to take it seriously, even if he didn't fully buy it. He grabbed the rifle that always leaned near the fireplace. It wasn't some fancy gun, just something he kept around because he lived in the woods and people out there keep guns the same way people in the city keep extra locks. He went to the back door and looked out, scanning the tree line from where I'd been standing. The eyes were gone. When I tried to describe them, my dad's face stayed calm, but I could tell he didn't know what to do with what I was saying. "I thought you were going to tell me some creep was in the yard," he said. The rifle thumped against the carpet when he lowered it. "You think it was a person?" "I guess." I pulled my jacket tighter around myself, trying to make my skin stop crawling. They didn't look like deer eyes or bear eyes. I don't know. I couldn't tell. He sighed and rubbed his forehead like he was tired. It was probably just some critter, Buttercup. "Sure," I said, even though I didn't believe it. After that, I stopped vaping at night. Or I tried to. My dad has a strict rule about it. No vaping in the house. He hates the smell, hates the habit, hates the idea that his kid does it. When I'm at school, I do what I want, but in his house, I usually follow the rules. So I started sneaking hits in the bathroom during the day, or I'd do it outside only when the sun was up. And at night, I avoided the windows. I started walking through the house without looking into the dark glass because I kept thinking I'd see those eyes staring at me from the other side of the reflection. It sounds ridiculous when I say it like that, even now, but fear doesn't care if it sounds logical. By the end of that summer, I started talking myself down. I told myself my dad was right. I told myself it had been a deer at a weird angle, or maybe two raccoons close together. Or maybe I had been tired and staring into darkness until my brain made a pattern. When I did go back outside at night, I made rules for myself. Porch light, always on, stay close to the door, keep one door open. Never lean over the railing again. The next night I tried, I stood in the doorway, hand on the knob, staring at the tree line until my eyes watered. The air was crisp and smelled like wet dirt and pine. The creek made that steady, restless sound over the rocks, like it was whispering to itself. The screen door creaked on its hinges when I pushed it. My throat and lungs ached with the urge for nicotine, and the need for it pulled me out more than bravery did. I sat. I vaped. I listened. Nothing happened. I didn't see the eyes again that summer, not once. Then I went back to my college town, back to heat and sidewalks and people everywhere. Fall and spring blurred together in the usual way. Notes, tests, late nights, too much coffee, too much stress. Winter break came and went without much meaning. I kept busy and distracted enough that the memory of those eyes became something I told myself had been a one-time scare. I didn't feel fully real again until I was back at my dad's the next summer, standing at the screen door like I'd never left. "Still haven't quit?" my dad asked, and his voice snapped me out of it. His hand shot out and gripped the wooden door, swinging it almost closed like he was trying to catch me. The loud thud rattled the frame and made the screen door shake. I jumped. "Sorry, you scared me." He gave an awkward laugh, rough and low, and picked up his drink. Then he turned and headed down into the basement, moving with the slow, stiff steps of a man getting older. I watched him go, then I went right back to my routine. Porch light on, chair in the same spot, back door open with the screen between me and the inside. I even left an old boot by the threshold, wedged in place like it could help me escape faster if I needed to shove the screen open and rush inside. It was stupid, but it made me feel better. Click. Inhale. Exhale. The vapor cloud was thick, and for a second it blocked my view of the yard. My hand shook when I waved it away. I tried to aim my exhale away from my face so I wouldn't lose sight of the tree line. Nothing moved, just wind in the branches. Click, inhale, exhale. When the wind paused, the creek filled the silence. That soft, constant trickle was almost soothing. The vape tasted like menthol and plastic and something sweet that lingered in the back of my throat. It distracted me from the dry, crusty feeling in my mouth. Click. Inhale, the eyes appeared, not in the trees, under the railing, so close that for a second my brain refused to name what I was seeing. They were right there, just below the deck boards, like something was pressed up against the underside and peeking through the gap. And then I saw more than eyes. Pale, smooth skin. A forehead resting against the wood, the mouth was hidden by the base of the deck, so all I could see were those huge black eyes staring up at me from too close a distance. They filled my vision. They didn't blink like an animal's eyes. They didn't shine. They just watched. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I shot up from the chair so fast it tipped back. The legs screeched across the deck boards. The remaining mist from my exhale broke apart in the air and vanished. I lunged for the door, desperate to get inside. My foot caught on the boot I'd left there for safety, and the stupid thing betrayed me. I went down hard, sliding onto the carpet inside the doorway like a kid tripping over their own toys. I crawled, twisted, and flung my legs back until I could kick the door shut. Then I stayed there on the floor, half in a ball, feet pressed against the door as if my weight could hold it closed. I didn't stand up. I didn't even want to move my hands. My nails dug into my palms and anchored me to the carpet while my blood hammered in my ears. The gun. I turned my head, searching for it like my life depended on it, because suddenly it felt like it did. The rifle leaned against the brick fireplace, just out of reach, more than an arm's length away, far enough that it might as well have been in another room. Two choices fought in my head: lock the door or get the gun. I forced myself to stop for 1 second, just one, and listen. I needed some sound, scratching, footsteps, anything that would tell me what it was doing out there. All I heard was my dad's TV booming from the basement. Some show with shouting and gunfire. Normal noise, the kind of noise that makes you feel crazy because it proves the world is still turning while you're falling apart. I slid across the carpet toward the rifle. My fingers closed around it. The wood was cool and solid in my grip. Then I did the dumbest thing possible. I yanked the door open and pointed the barrel out into the night, aiming at the spot where I thought the thing's face had been. The porch light shone on an empty deck. No pale skin, no eyes, no hand gripping the edge, just wood boards and shadows, and beyond that the dark slope and the trees. I stood there shaking, rifle up, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. I shut the door again, hard, and locked it. Then I checked the locks twice like I didn't trust my own hands. I checked the front door. I checked the windows. I even checked the little ones that barely opened, because suddenly every thin layer between me and the outside felt like a lie. After that, I went to my old bedroom. The comfort of it, my childhood posters, the familiar smell of old laundry detergent and wood, should have calmed me down. Instead, it made the fear feel worse, like something had crawled into the safest part of my life and left dirt on the floor. I slept, but it wasn't real sleep. It was restless, heavy, full of waking up with my heart racing. In the morning, I sat at the kitchen table and ground my teeth until my jaw hurt. My dad cooked breakfast like he always did. Bacon snapping in the pan, eggs sizzling. The smell should have been comforting. It wasn't. Your face is going to get stuck like that, he said, pouring himself coffee so dark it looked like oil. I know, I muttered. Then stop. He took a sip, then looked at me like he was trying to decide whether to push or tell me what's wrong. I'm going to take the gun out when I smoke, I said, cutting across him. Or quit, or I'll shoot the damn thing. An amused smile tried to form, like he thought this was me being dramatic the way I used to be as a teenager. That critter bothering you again, Buttercup? Then take care of it. I didn't laugh. I chewed the bacon, even though it tasted old and stale, like it had been sitting out too long. I swallowed it in half-chewed pieces, barely tasting anything. I felt sour all the way through, like the fear had curdled into anger overnight. When I went to grab my vape, it wasn't where I left it. Not in my pocket, not by the bed, not on the bathroom counter where I sometimes hid it. I checked the obvious places twice, then a third time, getting madder with every second. Finally, I stepped outside because the last place I'd used it was on the deck. Where the hell is it? I snapped to myself. My boot hit the boards with a hard stomp. The anger was so sharp it made my thoughts stupid. Did that thing take it? The idea felt insane, but it landed in my mind like it belonged there. Like it made perfect sense that something under the deck had stolen it just to mess with me. I yanked the cushions off the chair. I shook out the blanket I sometimes used when it was cold. I checked under the chair legs. I crouched and looked between the boards. Nothing. I turned, cursed, and in the last flare of frustration, I threw the cushions down harder than I meant to. Something small and plastic flew out. My vape. It bounced off the screen door, then slid through a gap in the rotting corner of the deck where the wood had split. I froze. Perfect, I muttered, bitter. Then I trudged down the stairs to retrieve it from under the deck. The air under there was cooler, damp, and smelled like wet leaves. The light didn't reach all the way, and the shadows felt thicker, pressed close. I found the vape. It was still faintly glowing in the dark, the little indicator light pulsing like a tiny heartbeat. I picked it up, wiped it on my shirt, and brought it to my lips without thinking. Click, inhale, exhale. Then, in the darkness beside me, I saw a glow that didn't belong to my device. A second faint light, like the reflection of the porch bulb on something wet. And my stomach dropped as my mind finally caught up. Fight or flight. I wanted my anger to choose for me. I wanted to be the kind of person who would turn around and grab whatever was there and drag it into the light. But my body chose for me. I ran. I backed out fast, banging my shoulder on the underside of the deck. I scrambled up the stairs, nearly tripping, and didn't stop until I was inside with the door locked behind me. I didn't tell my dad about that part. I didn't tell him about the second glow, or about how the air under the deck had felt like I was stepping into someone else's space. Later that day, I drove to a gas station and bought a new vape anyway. I told myself it was spite. Spite at my dad for not believing me. Spite at whatever was under the deck for scaring me. Spite at myself for being scared. But mostly it was because I couldn't stand not having one. The craving felt like claws in my lungs. That thing steals my stuff. I'll kill it, I muttered the whole drive, gripping the wheel too hard. At the store, I rushed in, ignored the small talk, showed my ID before the cashier even asked, paid, and left. In the car, I ripped the package open and took a long pull like I was trying to fill an empty space inside my chest. The buzz hit my head and smoothed the edges of my thoughts. On the way home, I rehearsed what I would do. Nothing complicated. Just one rule: shoot it if I see it. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, the plan felt solid. It made me feel less helpless. That night, my routine changed. Porch light, chair, door cracked. And now the gun. I kept it across my lap like a security blanket, trying not to think about how ridiculous that would look to anyone else. A college kid sitting on a porch with a vape and a rifle, waiting for something she couldn't describe. Nothing showed up that night. Nothing the next night. A week passed. Still nothing. I waited anyway. The waiting became its own kind of torture. Every rustle in the trees made my heart jump. Every shift of shadow made me tighten my grip on the rifle. I started to feel like I was being played with, like it would show itself only when it wanted to remind me it could. After almost 2 weeks of this, 12 nights of sitting out there with the gun and the porch light, and my nerves stretched thin, I finally snapped. "Where are you?" I shouted into the darkness, not caring anymore how it made me look. "Come here, you." And at the same time, the rifle went off. The sound exploded across the yard, louder than anything I'd ever heard that close. The recoil punched back into my shoulder. My hands went slick with sweat. My dad was on the porch in an instant. God damn it, inside, now. He grabbed the rifle from me and flipped the safety on the second it was in his hands. Then he took my sleeve and hauled me toward the door. I stumbled, half numb, half furious. Enough, he said as soon as we were inside. His voice was sharp, and not in a joking way. It's just a deer. No, my throat burned. My eyes stung. It stole my vape. It's messing with me. Dad, I swear I said enough. He tossed the gun aside like it was a piece of trash and grabbed my shoulders. He looked straight into my face. What are you smoking, Melissa? Dad, it's just that thing. There is no thing, he snapped. No creature. You're too smart for this. You're acting crazy. The word crazy hit harder than it should have. He kept going, like he had been holding it in for days. Screaming in the middle of the night, sitting out there with a gun every night. Really? I stared at him, shocked. I wanted him to believe me. I wanted him to see what I'd seen. But all I saw on his face was frustration and worry mixed together, the way a parent looks when they're scared something is wrong with their kid and they don't know how to fix it. My shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of me. Tears gathered before I even realized I was crying. I swear it's real, I whispered. I'm not crazy. I'm not... Stop. I wanted to melt into that hug. I wanted to let it fix everything. But the guilt and fear twisted together in my throat until it felt like I couldn't breathe. I tried to swallow the sob, but it broke anyway. My tears soaked into his shirt. And over his shoulder, through the open doorway at the edge of the porch light, I saw something move. A hand, not a paw. A hand, pale and thin, creeping up onto the deck boards like it was testing the surface. My entire body locked. Two black eyes glinted in the light, staring straight at us while my dad held me like a child. I gripped his shirt so hard my fingers hurt. He tightened his hug, misunderstanding, thinking I was just crying harder. My sobbing turned into short, trapped gasps. The tears stopped. My eyelids felt like they were pulling back too far, like my face didn't know how to react. My brain threw up two orders at once. Turn around or don't move. Let go or hold on tighter. I couldn't pick. My voice wouldn't work. All I managed was a thin, sharp squeak that didn't even sound human to me. My legs wouldn't move either. I couldn't step away from my dad. I couldn't step toward the door. I couldn't do anything but stare, frozen, while that hand paused halfway between the darkness and the light. It hesitated. Then, slowly, it opened one finger at a time. Gentle, careful, like it was trying to show it understood. It placed something on the deck boards. A vape. Mine scuffed and dirty like it had been dragged over wood and rocks. Then the hand slipped back into the dark. The eyes stayed. My dad loosened his hold after what felt like forever. Can we just pretend nothing is out there? He asked in a tired voice, like he was bargaining with me, like he was begging for peace. Forget about all this. I couldn't stop staring past him. The eyes didn't blink. The porch light made the deck look warm and normal, like it was just wood and nails and an old chair. But those eyes held their place in the edge of that light like they belonged there. My mouth finally worked enough for one word. Sure, I said, and the eyes kept watching, as if they were listening too.